Mel Brooks' masterwork in black and white, Young Frankenstein, is full of mishaps, blunders, and spontaneous improvisations that somehow made it funnier. The errors became a part of the magic, from phrases that made the actors giggle uncontrollably to things that magically vanish. Allow me to inhale your air. Decades later, interest is still piqued by one unedited photograph taken in the midst of pandemonium. Are you prepared to witness how these mishaps became treasure? Let's explore 20 of this comedic classic's most memorable blunders. The now famous bag sequence featured one of young Frankenstein's funniest and most memorable gaffes. He kindly asks Igor for assistance with the luggage as Gene Wilder, Dr. Frederick Frankenstein, and his staff arrive at the castle. Although the script required a direct answer, Igor's actor Marty Feldman chose to include a cheeky, spontaneous remark. "I'll take the person wearing the turban, and you'll take the blonde." The crew and actors were completely unprepared for it. Terry Garr nearly burst out laughing as she portrayed Inga, while Wilder was clearly having trouble keeping his cool. Feldman kept slipping the line, and even after the crew repeatedly filmed this moment, and he delivered it slightly differently each time it occurred, the crowd would burst out laughing. As Wilder's attempts to contain his laughter just enhanced the enjoyment of the situation. It became one of the most referenced scenes in the entire movie because Mel Brooks loved it so much that he kept the blooper. One of the most talked about comedy treasures was the straightforward entrance scene. Not too awful. That was a great improvisation that was immortalized on film. You are proven wrong by the next blooper just when you think the laughter can't grow any bigger. 19. The hump that continued to move. Igor, played by Marty Feldman, is recognizable by his large eyes, crooked smile, and, of course, his enigmatic hump. Here's the worst part, though. In reality, there was no hump joke in the script. Feldman made the decision to shift Igor's hump from one shoulder to the other during early production in order to see if anyone on the set would notice. No one spoke at first, but Gene Wilder soon realized and was unable to maintain composure. Feldman would naughtily move the hump whenever the camera rolled, and the joke turned into a continuous practical joke during the filming. Eventually, Mel Brooks realized that Feldman was really performing the part, and he agreed, enabling the hump joke to continue as one of the movie's most subdued yet hilarious features. Although audiences sometimes assume that this is the product of a cleverly crafted joke, Feldman's impromptu improvisation was the source of this. One of young Frankenstein's most enduring sight gags resulted from his lighthearted mockery. Once again, evidence that the most hilarious moments are those that are entirely spontaneous. Through Feldman's unconventional genius, the moving hump was elevated from a blooper to a significant component of the movie's legacy. The candlestick error is number 18. A straightforward candlestick is used in one of the most endearing blunders that audiences have ever seen. In the movie, Dr. Frankenstein and Inga navigate the castle's hidden corridors while holding a candle. Although it was intended to create tension in a parody of vintage horror films, viewers with keen eyes will discover something odd. In between shots, the candlestick abruptly disappears. It's holding it firmly and lighting their path in one frame. As if it vanished into thin air, it's gone the next instant. This was an unintended consequence of pure continuity chaos. Props would occasionally get lost in the bustle of numerous takes because the production was moving quickly. Perhaps Mel Brooks thought it wouldn't ruin the mood too much and chose not to touch it instead of doing pointless reshoots. However, it actually makes the scene funnier. The editing error seemed to be too blatant for a full-length horror film, the same genre that Young Frankenstein parodied. Fans who point out this candlestick error frequently claim that it blends in well with the parody style, giving the impression that it was done on purpose. Regardless of your point of view, this small element demonstrates how even flaws can add charm to a picture, whether you see it as a mistake or as a witty jab at bad filmmaking. 17. One of Young Frankenstein's most famous scenes, Wilder broke character during sedative, conceals a humorous mistake that was used in the final cut. Dr. Frankenstein is meant to give Igor instructions to give the monster a sedative in the script. However, Marty Feldman contorted the statement into his now famous delivery as the cameras rolled. Sedative? The odd pronunciation was unintentional. In the heat of the moment, Feldman was riffing off the script. Simply put, Gene Wilder wasn't prepared for it. Feldman yelled out, "Sedative?" Wide-eyed. A smile spread across Wilder's face, one he was struggling mightily to keep from showing. You can see him suppressing his amusement with that dash of crazy, even though he's supposed to be all serious and intense. Mel Brooks was partial to sliced, uncut hairstyles. He claimed that the spontaneous moment added to the scene's specialness. For years, fans have wondered if Cedar's line was written or not. But the cast said he was Feldman, the quintessential maverick. What began as a genuine off-camera gaffe became one of the film's most beloved lines. It's the ideal illustration of how Wilder and Feldman's relationship transformed mishaps into treasure, providing viewers with a humorous moment that is both unvarnished and classic. 16. The Slip in the Hay of Inga. One of Young Frankenstein's cheekiest scenes is the roll in the hay scene, which also conceals a minor yet amusing gaffe. Terry Garr, who portrayed the endearing and eccentric Inga, was expected to bounce around enthusiastically in a hay wagon while delivering her lines. Although filming the scene wasn't as seamless as it appeared on screen, the comedy was intended to highlight her innocent playfulness. She tried to balance on the hay and slipped a little on one take. Her timing went completely out of control, but it wasn't actually a fall. Garr was able to improvise so well beyond her lines that she added the tumble to what was happening as if it were part of the prepared performance, rather than abandoning her role. When she transformed a ruined take into something hilarious and organic, the crew members stopped laughing. Because he thought it added reality, Mel Brooks decided to retain the slip-in. It captured Garr's charmingly awkward fall and added that quirky element to the entire film, which made Inga even more adorable. An ordinary outtake took a surprising turn and turned into one of those silent, joyful flukes, which added a unique charm to the entire movie. 15. The Puttin' on the Ritz musical routine goes down in Young Frankenstein as one of the most memorable passages. First, Mel Brooks thought it was too ridiculous, but Gene Wilder pushed hard to preserve it in the script. Wilder was accurate when he believed that the comedy would become famous due to the ridiculousness of Frankenstein and his monster doing a Broadway routine while wearing tuxedos. However, there was complete chaos behind the scenes when that scenario was being filmed. Time was a problem for Peter Boyle. While playing the monster in the show, he either completely missed his cue or mangled the words in an overdone snarl in multiple takes. The actors and crew would consequently burst out laughing uncontrollably. Listening to this individual yell the name Ritz in a loud, off-key voice made it difficult for Wilder to maintain his composure. The shooting took a lot longer than expected because of the unending laughter. But in the end, Brooks welcomed the pandemonium. It evolved from a nearly unoriginal concept to one of the pivotal moments in comedic history. It's made funnier by the fact that it would destroy multiple takes with sincere laughter. Not only is Putting on the Ritz a classic, but it also exemplifies how Young Frankenstein's genius was fueled by fantastic disarray. 14. The Door That Refused to Shut. It appeared to be a straightforward arrangement at first glance. After entering the lab and shutting the heavy wooden door behind him, Dr. Frankenstein resumes his lines. However, that enormous door on the set had a mind of its own. The crew attempted to stage the scene flawlessly in a single take. However, the hinges jammed midway when Wilder tried to close it. The door obstinately refused to move, resulting in an unpleasant pause. Despite being very professional, Wilder did not act out of character. As Wilder pretended to be extremely frustrated by the circumstances, the stumble instead contributed to the raucous portion of his performance. The incident was made funnier by Wilder's natural tendency to crumble in the face of mistake. Even the surroundings suddenly appeared to be working against him. Mel Brooks came to realize that he truly enjoyed these snafus since they brought a variety of unique emotions to the entire set, while the crew was unable to contain their laughing. The unsuccessful attempt was kept for Footsteps by Brooks. The humorous attractiveness of Young Frankenstein was largely attributed to the odd things that went wrong yet were kept. The players weren't the only ones who had to deal with the old laughs, and the soundstage was also deeply involved in a scheme to look everywhere for gold. 13. The line break is "Follow me please." Igor, played by Marty Feldman, was erratic in the greatest sense of the word, and one of his most hilarious spontaneous actions occurred during a sequence that was supposed to be taken seriously. "Following me, please," Igor blurts out in a very professional tone as Dr. Frankenstein greets his helpers and gets ready to lead them into the castle. Feldman's delivery of the line, which was not in the screenplay, took everyone off guard with its exaggerated bow and comic flair. This moment could very well spill over into its own left side of lunacy, which is exactly why it is so funny. Gene Wilder laboriously tried to maintain the calm dignity of Frederick Frankenstein, but the flickering twitch of his lips told the other story just as he was trying to hold it in. Amor fati. Excited by how organically Feldman's mischief played with the scene, Mel Brooks decided to roll the camera instead of shouting, "Cut." Fans with keen eyes may see that Wilder's eye movements oscillate, as though he's attempting to maintain his calm. He was forcing himself not to laugh out loud at that moment. These are the moments, the bloopers that did make it into the final edit, some of those sweet little tidbits later on, memories whose impromptu, brilliant invention made young Frankenstein unique. Feldman's unpredictable behavior wasn't merely amusing. It created an unplanned humor that kept everyone else on their toes. 12. The sound effect of a horse. The frightening response of horses whenever Frau Blücher's name is uttered is one of the most persistent jokes in Young Frankenstein. The trill neighs appear out of nowhere and give people the most ridiculous chills. However, the majority of people are unaware that this gag originated from a blooper. The sound department unintentionally activated the horse effect during one take before anyone had even uttered her name. The actors started laughing right away, and Wilder almost wrecked the shot by doubling over. Mel Brooks didn't just brush the error aside, he went one step farther. In the subsequent sequences, he requested that the sound crew expand on the comedy by making the horses neigh longer and louder with each time Blücher's name was mentioned. A straightforward timing mistake developed into one of the movie's most well-known running jokes. Whether the joke has a deeper meaning is still up for dispute. Blücher is said to sound like the German word for glue, which would account for the horse's anxiety. Brooks liked to speculate, but he never verified this. However, there is no denying that this unintentional horse cue played a significant role in the comic book adaptation of the movie, transforming a simple blooper into a memorable comedic tool. 11. The question of light speed. The most hilarious blunders are occasionally not physical mishaps but rather instances where a performer unexpectedly inserts a line. In one scene, Elizabeth asks Frederick a curiously thought-provoking inquiry. What is the speed of light exactly? To begin with, the line's timing was odd. But when Wilder, who was already on the verge of laughing because of Feldman's antics, attempted to respond with scientific gravity, it got much hilarious. Marty Feldman decided to start throwing props backstage and clowning around as Wilder recited the line, 186,000 miles per second, converting what could have been a very restrained response into a chaotic mayhem. Feldman nearly ruined the scene, and Wilder's irritation at having to maintain his role was evident in the expression on his face. Brooks believed that this sentence, together with Wilder's pause and half-smirk, felt very real. The audience was given a glimpse of a persona who was, in fact, balancing on the brink of comedy and seriousness, rather than a flawless performance. Young Frankenstein was unique because of this combination. Although it might not seem appropriate for a horror spoof, this strange physics inquiry in the middle of the bloop scene was ideal at the time. That was amusing, but I promise you'll be smiling even more after the next slide. 10. The wig of Peter Boyle slipped. It took more than just grunts and growls to bring the monster to life in Young Frankenstein. Intricate makeup and a precisely tailored headgear were also necessary. With a heavy wig that finished the flat-topped appearance of the iconic Frankenstein monster and prosthetics attached to his face, Peter Boyle spent hours in the makeup chair. However, even the most expert installations can occasionally go horribly wrong. Boyle's wig started to come loose under the powerful hot-set lights during the very exciting operating table sequence, where Frederick and his crew worked their magic to bring the monster to life. It was imperceptible at first, a gradual tilt that was impossible for the team to catch. But as the terrifying creature got closer to a falling Halloween mask, Wilder and Terrigar caught a glimpse of it in the center of the image and found it difficult to contain their laughing. Boyle, who was always a pro, didn't pause the performance at all but instead carried on with his typical deadpan moans, which the audience in that particular scene found to be part of the act. Observing from behind the camera, Mel Brooks declared it to be so precious that he would not even attempt to correct it in editing. This simply gave the wig an offensive wink, as is customary, at the frighteningly funny tone of the movie. 9. The impromptu howl. Marty Feldman had a talent for transforming routine phrases into erratic mayhem. And a wholly unscripted howl was one of his greatest on-set surprises. Feldman abruptly tipped his head back and gave a long, distorted wolf howl during a scene that was meant to be spooky and tense. Nobody had anticipated it. Nor Terry Garr, nor Gene Wilder. Not even Mel Brooks, either. All of the tension in the room was released by the howl. Dr. Frankenstein, played by Wilder, was struggling to maintain his composure. In little time at all, it defeated him. Garr simply started laughing. The monstrous look also made it impossible for Peter Boyle to maintain a straight expression. Brooks was far too enamored with the take, but the crew itself laughed so loudly that it had to be res-hot. When Feldman felt like it, he encouraged him to keep it up. The tension was immediately relieved by the howl. Even though they are presented here as a single howl, not all of them managed to make it through the final mix. The majority of fans assume it was staged, but they will be unaware that their favorite Feldman was indeed the target of this prank. The spontaneous howl quickly discovered a tiny but unforgettable piece in the chaotic surface of young Frankenstein's humor, demonstrating that the most hilarious scares are frequently those that catch the audience off guard. Elizabeth's wig came loose at number 8. When Madeline Kahn played Elizabeth in Young Frankenstein, she was already a comedic icon. Her persona was intended to be exaggerated, glitzy, dramatic, and consistently a bit excessive. Her intricate hairpieces, which were expertly arranged to complement the exaggerated 1930s design, contributed to that appearance. However, Hollywood wigs can have their own minds at times. During a scene where Kahn was delivering one of Elizabeth's brilliantly melodramatic lines, her wig started to come loose. At first, it only tilted slightly off-center, threatening to destroy the photo, without making a really dramatic movement. Kahn acted out of character by exaggerating every facial expression and movement, making it appear more like Elizabeth's charm and vanity than a botched wig perm. It was difficult for the actors to maintain their composure, and Wilder apparently had to turn away to avoid laughing out loud. Brooks, who has long supported preserving the film's original disarray, thought the take was too humorous to ignore. Kahn skillfully incorporated this mishap into her performance, turning it from a wardrobe disaster into pure comedy gold. Even though everything she accomplished was excellent, the hair slip was sufficient evidence that it just enhanced the memorability of her persona. 7. The continuity error of the coffee cup. The speciality of blooper hunters is continuity errors. Fans still like pointing out the enigmatic coffee cup that young Frankenstein possesses. One scene shows Dr. Frankenstein holding a cup in his hand while conversing, seeming calm and collected. The issue? The cup appears and disappears in different hands between cuts, sometimes in the left hand, sometimes in the right, and sometimes not at all. Normally, in order to conceal such mistakes during production, another take would be shot. But because Young Frankenstein was produced so quickly and with so many hours of improvisation, many minor continuity errors went missed. Instead of seeming like errors, they blended in perfectly with the film's overall parody tone, in fact, the very tactlessness they were criticizing. The film's tacky style is a parody of the 1930s horror films, which frequently used jump cuts and mismatched props. Mel Brooks reportedly thought the editing room error was really funny and didn't think it was worth removing. The outcome? One of the movie's secret Easter eggs was the coffee cup that didn't vanish. A minor slip that was charmingly, almost chaotically, overtly appropriate for the overblown comic world. 6th. Blooper: The monster's dinner scene was meant to showcase Peter Boyle's commanding yet strangely empathetic demeanor. The monster, sitting at the table in his formal attire, was supposed to represent both ineptitude and dignity. However, turmoil is inevitable when you're surrounded by delicate props, strapped into an uncomfortable costume, and heavily make-upped. In a single take, Boyle gets up from the dinner table and carelessly knocks over a prop. The scene was nearly destroyed by the sudden and loud blast. But that moment was not to be denied to Gene Wilder. He invented a comedic line about the monster's clumsiness being intentional while being true to his role as Dr. Frankenstein. The spontaneous moment blended in perfectly with the performance because of the impeccable timing. As the scenario turned into pure comedic gold, the team let out an internal cry. It was so well suited to the monster's clumsy persona that Mel Brooks fell in love with it and kept the recording. they had the option to return and reenact the scene. However, the character's charm was enhanced by this gaffe. What may have been a blunder turned into a subtle joke that added humor and humanized the monster. The obstinate fake leg is number 5. Frederick and Igor are expected to unearth a body in order to carry out Frankenstein's experiment during one of the tomb robbing sequences. For a little joke, the prop team had built a fake leg to protrude from the ground. It was easy enough, but the leg refused to cooperate. The prop became lodged in the set as Marty Feldman attempted to pull it free. Instead of deviating from his usual behavior, Feldman gave his all to the work at hand and acted out his struggle, pulling and twisting the leg while making little, spontaneous moans. Gene Wilder, who tried his hardest to maintain a straight face, nearly burst out laughing next to him. Feldman moved the theatrics to the leg that was refusing to cooperate. Amid the crew's hysterics, the prop finally broke apart in a most spectacular way, sending them both backward onto the mud. This intensity was adored by Mel Brooks, who urged Feldman to keep playing it awkwardly on the subsequent takes, adding a comedic element to Igor's antics. It began with a straightforward prop malfunction. This proved to be the quintessential example of how youthful Frankenstein transformed errors into hilarious gold. 4th. The lightning malfunction. Dr. Frankenstein's attempt to bring the monster to life is one of young Frankenstein's most famous sequences. To evoke the classic horror films of the 1930s, the laboratory set featured sparking coils, vintage-looking equipment and dramatic lighting. However, with all those real-world implications, things weren't always as planned. Then there was one when the lightning rig simply fizzled, rather than producing the dramatic crackle and flare that the screenplay called for. It sputtered weakly, flickering, barely torchlit, in place of that great, scary bolt. Instead of appearing to be a scientific triumph, it resembled a damaged bulb. Other crew members rushed to check what went wrong instead, and Gene Wilder laughed at the abrupt anticlimax. According to reports, Marty Feldman, who is always quick to seize the chance to say something snarky, said something that drove the entire set into a frenzy and completely ruined the take. However, Mel Brooks had a different idea. He decided not to remove the video and added the faulty concept later on to make the monster's frantic revival even funnier. What was planned to be a scary movie ended up becoming a spoof of botched science experiments, the exact type of humor that defined the mood of the movie. 3rd. Elevator shake accident. Young Frankenstein's enormous laboratory elevator was intended to resemble a scene from a classic horror film, clumsy, metallic, and slightly menacing. However, the set piece was far from stable in practice. In one instance, the lift started to shake dangerously just as Dr. Frankenstein and his helpers were scheduled to ride it gently to the top floor. When the platform suddenly began to move, Terry Garr, who played Inga, let out a real cry of fear. The situation became even more tight because of this ear-piercing and unscripted part. The staff quickly came to terms with what had transpired. Additionally, Gene Wilder and Marty Feldman remained entirely in character rather than cutting. Feldman acted out his actions to make the lift ride feel rough, while Wilder went on as if the entire thing had been part of the plan. Mel Brooks enjoyed the rawness of that moment, and chose instead to preserve that spontaneous Gerard moment. With its slapstick danger and character-based humor, what may have been a technological catastrophe turned into comedic gold. Since the lift-shaking incident was intended to mirror the film's contradiction of chaos, comedy, and improvisation, it further suited the lab for the kind of unforeseen happenings this film would present to viewers. 2nd place. The laughing fits of Brooks and Wilder. The wild spasms of laughter that Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks enjoyed are the behind-the-scenes tale that most embodies the essence of young Frankenstein. Known for his fervor and dedication to maintaining his persona, Wilder co-wrote the script with Brooks. However, the improvisation was so consistent and the comedy so incisive on this set that even he couldn't help but laugh. Shooting occasionally took twice as long as anticipated, Brooks later acknowledged, only because Wilder was unable to suppress his laughing. At times, Feldman's cunning ad-libs were held accountable. Sometimes it was Peter Boyle's almost precisely timed grunt, but Brooks was the one who would start the chain reaction most of the time. Brooks would utterly spoil the take by laughing at the actors while directing from behind the camera. His laughter even leaked into the microphones, forcing the sound technicians to re-record parts of the recording. Rather than addressing the issue, Brooks facilitated the disorder. The wild laughing, he thought, was evidence that they had hit comic gold. Indeed, he was correct. When there was a lot of enthusiasm on the set, the outcome was immediately seen on television. These outbursts of laughter were far from coincidental. They served as the beating heart of a movie that thrived on happiness, improvisation, and a certain kind of freedom. Hold on tight, for the humor is elevated to a whole new level by our top pick. The first is the unaltered picture. One of the numerous iconic blunders made by young Frankenstein sticks out because it is preserved in both the movie and a single image. For years, fans have been sharing a picture of Gene Wilder laughing uncontrollably while Marty Feldman breaks character next to him. Many people thought the photo was edited to make it appear humorous or staged for publicity, but it wasn't. This image, which was taken during an outtake, is entirely authentic. When Wilder was unable to maintain his composure, Feldman's ad-lib went astray, and Wilder broke into real hysterics, laughing so hard that he doubled over as his dignified doctor. The persona of Frankenstein vanished. Originally intended to be a staged promotional photo, the image ended up looking chaotic. A unique instance where the actors appeared to be relishing the chaos just as much as their viewers would subsequently. Mel Brooks cherished these occasions. They represented the essence of the movie to him. Comedy derived from accidents, unadulterated improvisation, and pure slapstick delight. Despite ostensibly filming a serious moment, the cast and crew couldn't stop laughing behind the black and white extravaganza that parodies monsters and mad scientists, as evidenced by the uncontrolled shot that serves as a metaphor for the production. That concludes our list of the funniest hidden bloopers from Young Frankenstein. What was the one that made you chuckle the most? Tell us in the comments section below. Tell us which is your favorite. Remember to press the like button. To ensure you never miss a video, ring the bell and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes movie secrets. Click the next video on your screen if you're prepared for even more unexpected mistakes. The amusement doesn't end here.